This is A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanov, and let's begin with the top headlines making news around the world. Qatar says indirect U.S. Iran talks have made positive progress on issues tied to the Memorandum of Understanding. Russian missile and drone strikes in Ukraine capital kill at least 18 and injure dozens. And the European Union is stepping up its engagement with the South Caucasus as Ursula von der Leyen visits Yerevan after Baku. Another round of indirect talks between the United States and Iran has wrapped up in Doha, with negotiators reporting progress on technical issues. But key differences remain and further discussions are planned.
Maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz and the unfreezing of Iranian funds dominated the latest round of indirect U.S. Iran talks in Doha. Sources say the two-day meetings focused on implementing those parts of the interim agreement announced 2 weeks ago. They said the discussions were technical in nature and that Iran's nuclear program was not discussed.
Denuclearization of Iran is moving along well. They've had very good meetings, and we'll see. We hit them very hard for 3 nights, as you know, but we're getting along very well.
Qatar's foreign ministry said the talks made positive progress on issues linked to the memorandum that halted the war in June and built on the outcomes of the summit in Switzerland. Neither side said whether they had managed to bridge any of their remaining differences. Meanwhile, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has only partially resumed, and Iran has said it intends to begin charging shipping tolls from mid-August after the agreement's toll-free period expires. The next meeting is expected after the week-long funeral procession for Iran's late Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, which begins on Saturday.
Tehran said it will open a communication channel with Washington to report alleged violations of the ceasefire Memorandum of Understanding following talks in Qatar on Wednesday. Iran also insisted the Strait of Hormuz would be managed by Tehran, not the United States. A news correspondent Tura Shiralilo has more from Tehran.
Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister for Legal Affairs, Kazem Gharibabadi, said after a visit to Qatar that a communication channel would be opened with the U.S. to report alleged breaches of the 60-day ceasefire Memorandum of Understanding signed on 17th of July to end hostilities. He made the statement following a one-day visit to Doha on Wednesday to negotiate with Qatari and Pakistani mediators over the terms of the Iran-US deal and the roadmap for implementing its provisions. He said it was decided that a communication channel would be established on Thursday and that shortcomings in the implementation of the MOU would be reported, discussed, and addressed in a formal and documented manner. However, in a post on X, the senior diplomat denied there had been any mediated talks with U.S. negotiators while Iranian and U.S. officials were both visiting Doha. According to Gharibabadi, the meetings of the Iranian delegation were held solely in trilateral formats with the Qatari and Pakistani delegations to follow up on implementation of the provisions of the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, particularly those concerning Lebanon and the release of frozen assets. In Doha, he met Qatar's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister and held separate meetings with Qatari central bank officials to discuss the release of part of Iran's blocked funds, reportedly estimated at $3 billion of a total $12 billion. In another development signaling the bumpy road ahead for Tehran and Washington in reaching a final peace agreement, the Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister on Thursday strongly rejected a U.S. Central Command security meeting held in Manama, asserting that the Strait of Hormuz is under Iran's authority, not CENTCOM's. He said the military meeting in Bahrain cannot create legal order or security in the Persian Gulf. Leading the technical level talks with Washington, Gharibabadi added, regional security will be ensured by ending U.S. intervention and withdrawing from the region. respecting the sovereignty of countries and accepting new geopolitical realities not under the U.S. military umbrella. Turash Iralilu from Tehran for A News.
Israelis have protested in Jerusalem to mark 1,000 days since the 7th of October attack in 2023. Demonstrators are demanding an independent state inquiry into the failures that led to the assault.
Dozens of Israeli protesters took to the streets of Jerusalem to mark 1,000 days since the October 7th attack in 2023. The protest is part of wider commemorations led by bereaved families, hostage families, and survivors. They're demanding accountability and an independent inquiry. Demonstrators gathered outside the Knesset, blocking roads, but were later removed by police. Protesters later stood outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's official residence, holding large photos of hostages who were killed in captivity in Gaza.
We demand an official commission of inquiry by the Israeli government to investigate an independent commission of inquiry to uncover what happened and what policies led to this terrible tragedy, this massacre on October 7th.
Today it's 1,000 days since the October 7th massacre, and no one is actually taking any responsibility. We are heartbroken and terrified, and we came here to demand that someone, the government, that anyone will take responsibility and say that they are sorry and that they are willing to change the reality, so we will make everything good again, and so we will be able to breathe again.
Netanyahu's coalition has promoted a government-appointed inquiry, but protesters say only an independent state commission can examine the political and security failures that preceded the attack. The Hamas-led attack killed around 1,200 people in Israel, while more than 150 others were kidnapped. Israel's war in Gaza killed more than 75,000 people, according to the health ministry, and left much of the territory in ruins before a US brokered ceasefire in October 2025.
Russia and Ukraine have exchanged another wave of long-range attacks, with Kyiv facing a deadly overnight barrage just hours after Ukrainian drones reportedly struck targets deep inside Russia. Ukrainian officials say at least 18 people were killed and dozens injured, as President Volodymyr Zelensky renewed calls for stronger air defenses. Here is the latest.
Russia launched an overnight wave of missiles and drones targeting the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, in one of the largest aerial assaults in recent months. Residents took shelter in the city's metro stations as the attack damaged residential buildings and civilian infrastructure. Also, a fire broke out on the roof of a hotel along central Shevchenko Boulevard. Officials say it's the second deadliest Russian attack on Kyiv so far this year.
A miracle happened here today, thanks primarily to the work of the rescue teams. This is the first time in Ukraine that 7 people have been rescued from under the rubble.
Earlier, President Volodymyr Zelensky had warned that intelligence suggested Russia was preparing a large-scale overnight assault and cut short his visit to Dublin. He was there for the start of Ireland's 6-month rotating presidency of the European Union. Following the attack, Zelensky said emergency crews were still searching through the rubble at more than 20 damaged sites across Kyiv. He said Russia launched more than 70 missiles and nearly 500 attack drones overnight, with the Ukrainian capital as the main target. The president renewed his appeal for additional Western air defense systems, saying stronger protection, including Patriot missile systems and anti-ballistic capabilities, was essential to prevent further attacks. The latest barrage comes just hours after Ukraine carried out long-range drone strikes inside Russia, reportedly targeting an oil refinery in Ufa and defense industrial facilities in the Penza region. Kyiv says the attacks are aimed at weakening Russia's military logistics and energy infrastructure, while Moscow has intensified its aerial campaign against Ukrainian cities. Both deny targeting civilians.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has used his visit to Dublin to underline Ireland's role as an ally. For Kyiv, the visit will be a political opportunity, keeping the country high on the European Union's agenda, securing continued support and pushing forward its long-term goal of membership.
Welcome to This Day in Europe and a visit to Dublin by Ukraine's president. Volodymyr Zelensky said he hopes that during Ireland's 6-month presidency of the Council of the European Union, tangible progress will be made on Ukraine's path toward EU membership by opening all remaining negotiating clusters. Ireland is one of Ukraine's strongest supporters within the bloc, backing tougher sanctions on Russia, continued military assistance, and Kyiv's eventual accession to the bloc. With Dublin now chairing meetings of EU ministers and helping shape the bloc's legislative agenda, Ukraine sees an opportunity to keep enlargement high on Europe's political priorities. However, EU membership remains a long-term goal, and Kyiv says its most urgent priority is funding the war. On that front, Reuters reports that a letter from Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov urges the EU to release 6.6 billion euros from the European Peace Facility, saying there's a critical 6 to 9 month window to strengthen Ukraine's position on the battlefield. According to the letter, Ukraine's defense needs this year total roughly 136 billion euros, with major funding gaps remaining despite existing European support, including about 28.3 billion euros for defense this year through the EU's 90 billion euro loan program. Kyiv says directing those funds toward military aid now could have the greatest and most immediate impact as Ukraine seeks to slow Russian forces, expand its own counterattacks, and maintain pressure through long-range strikes inside Russia. Last month, Fedorov said Ukraine was seeking an additional 20 billion euros in military assistance from the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, the 50-nation alliance better known as the Ramstein Group, on top of the 40 billion euros already pledged. For Ukraine, the message is clear. Success in Brussels and success on the battlefield are becoming increasingly intertwined. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Russia and Ukraine are expanding their war far beyond the front lines, while Kyiv continues striking Russia's energy infrastructure deep inside its territory. Moscow has responded with another deadly wave of missile and drone attacks on the Ukrainian capital. Ukraine says its long-range campaign is disrupting Russia's fuel supplies, with reports of gasoline shortages and imports of refined fuel to stabilize the market. Meanwhile, the latest overnight strike on Kyiv has renewed calls from European leaders for stronger sanctions against Moscow and faster delivery of air defense systems. To discuss the military, political and strategic implications, we are joined by Andriy Dobryansky, policy expert at the Center for U.S.-Ukrainian Relations, speaking to us live from New York. Mr. Dobryansky, welcome and thank you for joining our discussion today.
Thank you for having me back on.
Thank you. Mr. Dobryansky, Ukraine is now striking targets more than 1,300 kilometers inside Russia. How significant is this evolution in Kyiv's military strategy?
We just had a major conference in Washington 2 weeks ago where we compared June of 2025 with June of 2026. And the major difference is Ukraine's success on the battlefield. And that means enlarging the battlefield. Where we were in 2025, Ukraine did not have the means, not just for individual one-off attacks against Russia deep past 1,000 kilometers, but we didn't have the ability to manufacture these drones at scale. And that's really the difference that we're having now. The scale of the manufacturing, which allows then for Ukraine to do the more plodding and slower work of manufacturing ballistic missiles, which are being shot at a lower rate than their drones. But Ukraine is quite successful with their drone warfare using the extensive longer range ability to strike in areas of Russia where Russia previously thought they were safe.
Mr. Dobryansky, Ukrainian officials say repeated attacks on Russian refineries are creating fuel shortages. Could this begin affecting Russia's military, logistics and operational tempo?
Yes, the two sides of Ukraine's campaign here are attacking, as they say, their aerial sanctions against Russia because those are combined with Western sanctions. Western sanctions block the ability of those refineries to purchase replacement parts that could only be found in Western manufacturers. So every time Ukraine strikes a oil refining facility in Russia, Russia is unable to get it back online as quickly as possible. The second side of its aerial strike are the logistics lines. Yeah, Russia famously created this land bridge in 2022 connecting Crimea to the Russian mainland, and that land bridge is dominated by two, in some areas, three highways, all of which are sitting ducks for short-range drone attacks. So on overland tanker deliveries can't reach certain areas, and that's hindering Russia's military progress to the extent where in the last during the spring-summer offensive of 2026, Russia has only been able to verifiably claim 30 kilometers of additional square kilometers of additional land.
But Russia remains one of the world's largest oil producers. How politically damaging is it for Moscow to reportedly import gasoline to ease domestic shortages?
Yeah, just last year, there was a discussion between the United States and India about the fact that India kept importing Russian oil. And at this point, what you're referring to is now the import of oil from India back to Russia. This is very different than what was happening a year ago. And again, demonstrates the fact that Ukraine has not only been able to have success on the battlefield, but the extent of it. Not only has it been repeatedly claimed that Russia is inevitable to win the war because it is a larger nation than Ukraine, but on the flip side, it is also a larger nation to defend. Therefore, every time Ukraine increases its capacity to go further and further at Russian territory, that's more and more territory that Russia is then forced to defend.
So Russia responded with one of its deadliest attacks on Kyiv in recent months. Is Moscow attempting to deter Ukraine's deep strike campaign through escalation?
Well, as far as using the word response, Ukraine is responding to an attack under the UN Charter. I believe it's the Statute 51. Ukraine is fully within its international right to strike at Russia after being invaded by Russia. Every day of occupation in Russia and in Ukraine, and every strike by Russia at Ukraine is a violation of international law. So whatever Russia may say as a response, every strike is a breaking of international law, as it is invading and attacking a sovereign country. What Ukraine is doing is, after being first struck and invaded, they are responding. What's going to happen after this depends on the supply lines, not just of fuel, but also parts availability. And here is where China gets in. Everybody knows that China has been propping up the economy of Russia. We also notably have seen that Belarus has turned to China for more added economic support. But the key thing is China going to continue to subsidize Russia with the parts that are necessary for its military attacks? And so long as that continues, then Russia has the ability to prolong this conflict.
Mr. Dobyanski, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas says she will push for additional sanctions. Could further sanctions meaningfully constrain Russia's military-industrial capacity?
Oh, absolutely, and that goes hand in hand with those attacks on the Russian mainland. Every time that Ukraine is attacking a strategic point, those aren't being outfitted with solely internally manufactured parts. So the more Ukraine attacks facilities that utilize Western technologies and Western parts, higher sanctions against obtaining those parts makes it more difficult for them to get their economy back online.
Andriy Dobyanski, thank you very much for your valuable insights and for taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate your perspective. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Thank you. As Washington considers how Americans could benefit from the rapid growth of artificial intelligence, OpenAI is reportedly discussing giving the U.S. government a stake in the company. It's reported that a proposal to give the U.S. government a 5% stake in OpenAI is under discussion. The Financial Times says the company also suggested other leading U.S. AI firms could provide similar stakes through a public investment vehicle. The report could not be independently verified, and neither OpenAI nor the White House immediately responded to requests for comment. We'll continue with the main stories of the day after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. A port in Venezuela's coastal state of La Guaira has been converted into a temporary morgue after last week's twin earthquakes overwhelmed local facilities. Rows of coffins were seen at the site on Wednesday. Officials say around 2,300 people have been killed. Local media reported that hospital morgues had reached capacity as the scale of the disaster grew. The French government says that the total number of drownings during the recent heat wave is now 90. It comes ahead of another wave of extreme high temperatures, which is forecast to hit France next week. Rose Cullen reports.
The French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu is holding a ministerial meeting on Thursday in the southern French city of Marseille, and that meeting with ministers to discuss the heat wave and the wildfires comes as several blazes approach the city of Marseille. It's something that the fire brigade feared that the recent spell of hot and dry weather would mean that we could have one of the worst summers in France in recent history in terms of the number and the intensity of the blazes. It's something that happens every summer, but this July and August could be particularly bad months in terms of wildfires in the south of France. Also on Thursday, we've had confirmation that the number of people who died in drowning incidents in France since the 18th of June has risen to 90. Number of people getting into difficulty in rivers, people getting caught in riptides in the sea as they've gone into different bodies of water to try to cool off from the recent extremely high temperatures. There is another heat wave coming next week, starting on the 6th of July. The city of Bordeaux expected to hit temperatures of around 41 degrees Celsius and around 35 degrees here in the French capital, meaning that the government fears extra pressure being put on the health service. Already hospitals are saturated, dealing with people who had suffered heat stroke in the previous heat wave, and they are worried that there could be a new surge of people seeking urgent medical treatment because of the unseasonably high temperatures due to hit France next week. Ross Cullen, A News, Paris.
The United States, Mexico and Canada are reviewing the future of their regional trade deal, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. The pact governs much of North America's trade, including cars, agriculture, manufacturing and labor rules. U.S. Trade Representative is meeting virtually with Mexican economy and Canadian Trade Minister to discuss whether the agreement should be extended for another 16 years. Mexico says it supports an extension, but Washington says more negotiations are needed as U.S. President Donald Trump pushes for more manufacturing to move back to the United States. India and Japan have agreed to expand cooperation across artificial intelligence, metals, energy and defense as the two Asian powers move to strengthen economic and strategic ties. The agreements were signed on Thursday after talks in New Delhi between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. Both sides also agreed to develop a joint roadmap on economic security. To West Africa, and floods in Ivory Coast have killed 59 people, according to a government spokesman. Speaking after a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, its government minister said search operations are continuing, and authorities fear the death toll could rise. Heavy rains have also affected neighboring Ghana, where at least 12 people have been killed after large parts of the country, including the capital Accra, were flooded. Authorities in Germany have arrested a man suspected of having taken part in the 1994 Rwandan genocide, where nearly 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed during 100 days of mass violence. Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
German prosecutors say they arrested a man suspected to have participated in the 1994 Rwandan genocide against the Tutsis. The arrest was made in the central German state of Hesse. The suspect, a German Rwandan national, has only been identified as Innocent S. under German privacy laws. He's accused of ordering the killing of 25 ethnic Tutsis. while he was an assistant to the mayor of Kyiv in northwestern Rwanda. Prosecutors say he also participated in the killings by stabbing a victim in the chest with a knife. Germany has prosecuted several suspects linked to the Rwandan genocide since the killings occurred in 1994. They have done so under the principle of universal jurisdiction, which allows courts to try suspects of serious international crimes regardless of where they were committed. The 1994 genocide began after the plane carrying the then Rwandan president, Juvenal Habyarimana, was shot down. More than 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were killed by Hutu militias in about 100 days. The Rwandan government has continued seeking justice for the victims of the genocide and strengthened measures to ensure such atrocities do not happen again. Chris Ochamringa for A News in Kinshasa.
And now moving on to the World Cup, let's get all the latest news from Katie Wilson, who joins us with Sports Hour.
Hi, I'm Katie Wilson and here's your World Cup roundup for today. The round of 32 is well underway and there's already been some major upsets, none more so than Germany, who were eliminated from the tournament after losing to Paraguay on penalties. Let's get some reaction to that game.
This is the best freaking experience we have ever had. This generation have not seen this level of football, this Guarani energy that we've seen today was the best experience I've ever had. I just can't describe. So this team, with that energy, with that grit, can face anybody and anybody. So France, next. Come on, let's go.
Honestly, best game I've ever seen in my life. And now bring us friends. We're going to the final.
I'm lost for words. I can't even put it into words. The German team played well. It just wasn't enough. I think Paraguay was too strong at the back. Maybe that was the reason. I don't know.
Now, there's favourites to win the tournament and favourites who stole the hearts of audiences around the world. That can certainly be said for the Japanese fans who saw their team exit the tournament on Monday after losing 2-1 to Brazil. Let's take a look.
I thought the game was very difficult because Brazil seemed too relaxed at the beginning. Then Japan scored and Brazil came back. They got back into the game, but I already knew it was going to be 2-1.
The game was good, but tense. Everybody made us nervous. Japan played really well and put pressure on us, but Brazil also played very well.
I thought we could win today. I even thought we might score a second goal. It's a shame. It's frustrating. Seeing the players' tears at the end, it's quite heartbreaking.
Well, the Brazilians' next game is against the mighty Vikings, Norway. Another set of fans who have stolen hearts with their iconic Viking roar. They'll be hoping their star striker Erling Haaland will score enough goals to take them into the quarter-finals. Let's hear from their captain, Martin Ødegaard.
And Erling, of course, scoring goals every single time he plays almost. So yeah, it's amazing to have him in the team, and we're lucky to have him. And yeah, it's just about giving him as many opportunities as possible.
That's your World Cup news for today. I'll be back on Sunday with more from the tournament. Thanks for watching.
After the break, we'll continue with the main stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News, and now we shift our focus to the region. President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, has arrived in Tbilisi for a state visit at the invitation of Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze. The visit includes talks with Georgian President Mikhail Kavelashvili on strengthening bilateral relations, expanding cooperation across multiple sectors and regional issues. The program also includes cultural and humanitarian events, as well as an official ceremony at the presidential palace. And to discuss the significance of this visit and what it means for regional connectivity and Eurasian economic integration, we're joined by Oybek Shaikov, a founder, board member of Euros, executive chairman of East-West Group. Mr. Shaikov, welcome and thank you for being part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Mr. Shaikov, President Mirziyoyev's visit is being described as historic. Why is this visit significant for both Uzbekistan and Georgia at this particular moment?
Both countries are currently on the middle corridor. We have a situation in the world which makes the Eurasian continent reshape its importance for the entire global supply chains in many different areas. Uzbekistan is in the middle of Central Asia, and of course Georgia is in the middle of Caucasus, and we have new cooperation, new trade routes, new supply chains passing through both regions. So this is a very natural tendency to find ways to grow closer and collaborate.
Mr. Shaikov, beyond diplomacy, what concrete outcomes should we expect from the meetings in Tbilisi? Which agreements could have the greatest long-term impact?
I think one of the most important elements, of course, is the economic cooperation. This is the agenda of this visit. I think yesterday there was a very big business forum, Georgian-Uzbek business forum. Of course, it's also very importantly the first ever visit of Uzbekistan's head of state to Georgia. We expect, of course, transport corridors to dominate the agenda, but also trade. It's been growing significantly. I think it's going to keep growing. Uzbekistan exports to Georgia a lot of agricultural products, some machinery. Georgia exports to Uzbekistan quite a lot as well. So we expect trade to be one of the main subjects, and of course, then the logistic roads as well, global cooperation.
How important is Georgia for Uzbekistan's strategy of gaining better access to European markets through the Middle Corridor?
Of course, Georgia is a critical middle point, as in fact is Azerbaijan for the Middle Corridor. European goods flow, a lot of goods from China flow through Uzbekistan, through Central Asia, into Caucasus and then to Europe. I believe that strategic importance of gaining new infrastructure for the European Union is quite important. For Uzbekistan, of course, it's getting opportunity to finance that infrastructure, to build new roads, to build new facilities, and for same strategy goes for Georgia, in fact, as well. Georgia has also quite a lot of experience in accessing European funding in the past to really build up that transport infrastructure, which is really the country is using today. That experience for Uzbekistan is important, and I believe that that collaboration is also going to yield some very positive results in the very long term.
Mr. Shaikov, the modernization of the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars railway and the planned China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway could eventually form a larger transport network. How transformative could that be for Eurasian trade?
This is absolutely the biggest strategy, both, I would say, regions, to create really sustainable, long-term, new transport corridors. We have seen how supply chains can be disrupted very easily. Previously in the Northern Europe, then we can see in the Middle East. So creating those alternative new corridors can be a very strategic, very long-term, let's say, solution, especially when regions work together. Caspian region and Central Asian region working together, that means a very big advantage for both regions. And of course, that means seamless transit. Today, transit from Uzbekistan to Europe is difficult because Uzbekistan, of course, is a double landlocked country. It's quite far from Europe. Accessing new, let's say, transport corridors that are also being built in the Caspian region, and then connecting the new trade roads, new facilities, new railroads being built in Central Asia, to that will be, let's say, exponential impact on entire supply chain, whoever is using that supply chain, whoever is using that middle.
So bilateral trade has grown steadily, but leaders are aiming much higher. Which sectors, manufacturing, agriculture, logistics, digital services, or energy, offer the greatest untapped potential?
It's, I think general trade is important. Of course, agricultural sectors have been quite important for both Uzbekistan and Georgia, very much complementary, in fact, food and beverage versus agricultural products. We see more and more machinery being exported from Uzbekistan also to Georgia in recent years. We have a lot of Georgian companies, in fact, service companies. And I think this is maybe something that is underlined and not yet visible, but a lot of Georgian companies are present in Uzbekistan today, actively developing their presence in the market, helping Uzbekistan's service sector develop as well much quicker than it otherwise would. Of course, there is this limited language barrier. There is much closer cultural connections. So that opportunity of collaboration in the service sector creates really long-term opportunities. I personally believe service sector will be the biggest beneficiary in the next 5-10 years.
Oybek Shaikov, founder, board member of EU Rose, executive chairman of East West Group. Thank you very much for your valuable insights and for taking the time to speak with us. We greatly appreciate your analysis. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
President Ilham Aliyev has received Turkey's Justice Minister Akın Gürlek in Baku as the two sides reaffirmed close ally ties and cooperation in the justice sector. The meeting focused on the continued development of Azerbaijan-Turkey relations based on common history, culture and brotherhood. Gürlek praised Azerbaijan's economic progress, growing international influence and historic Karabakh victory. He highlighted Azerbaijan's role in regional energy, connectivity and transport projects, including the Zangezur corridor. The sides discussed expanding cooperation between the two countries' justice ministries. The European Union is stepping up its engagement with Armenia as Yerevan looks to deepen economic and political ties with Brussels. The latest talks come amid efforts to diversify Armenia's trade links and strengthen cooperation with European partners.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has visited Yerevan for talks with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. The meeting focused on EU-Armenia relations, economic cooperation and Brussels support for Armenia's diversification efforts. Pashinyan said Armenia and the European Union are closer than ever.
Today's meeting reaffirmed that the EU is one of Armenia's most reliable partners. Armenia and the EU are closer to each other than ever before. This expression is becoming more tangible day by day, gaining not only political but also practical and economic application. I am pleased to note that we discussed our joint work aimed at launching various EU support mechanisms for Armenia's economic diversification challenges.
The visit comes as Armenia seeks to diversify its economy and reduce dependence on Russia, which remains its largest trading partner. Von der Leyen said Armenia was under economic pressure from Moscow and pledged further EU support.
I know Armenia is still facing significant economic pressure from Russia. Nothing short of economic coercion, actually. But rest assured, when pressure mounts on our partners, the European Union steps up. And I have some announcements here too. You will soon receive an additional 18 million euros to help strengthen and diversify your trade.
The additional 18 million euros is part of a wider 52 million euro EU assistance package for Armenia. Von der Leyen also said the EU is preparing trade measures that would make almost 80% of Armenian exports to the bloc tariff-free. The measures are aimed at giving Armenian goods easier access to the EU's single market of around 450 million consumers. Her visit followed talks in Baku, where the EU announced up to 200 million euros for transport, energy and digital links in the South Caucasus.
Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan says expanding regional energy links could help strengthen Armenia's energy security. Speaking alongside European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in Yerevan, he said power lines and interconnectors with Azerbaijan and Turkey could also support the green transition.
In the context of implementing the Crossroads of Peace concept and the inclusive unblocking of regional communication routes, alongside the promotion of transport connectivity, I also attach importance to expanding energy connectivity, including the construction of power transmission lines and interconnectors with neighbouring Turkey and Azerbaijan. This can contribute both to energy security and to the green transition.
Turkey and Kyrgyzstan say they are committed to deepening their strategic partnership. Speaking in Ankara after talks with his Kyrgyz counterpart Jeenbek Kulubayev, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said both sides agreed to strengthen cooperation in trade, investment, transport and connectivity. Fidan congratulated Kyrgyzstan on its election as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for 2027 to 2028, calling it a historic success. The two ministers also discussed Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East, Syria, Gaza and Turkey's EU and NATO agenda. Both sides discussed plans to connect the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway to the Middle Corridor.
Bugünkü görüşmelerimizde de liderlerimizin yüksek düzeyli.
During today's meeting, we reviewed the goals set by our leaders at the latest meeting of the High-Level Strategic Cooperation Council. We assessed where we stand in achieving those objectives, what still needs to be done, and how we can further strengthen our cooperation. In addition, we held comprehensive discussions on regional and global issues. We also signed a cooperation program between our foreign ministries for the 2027 to 2028 period. Our cooperation should become more structured, more systematic and more institutionalized, and we are working towards that at every level. In this context, we will continue to expand our joint activities across a wide range of areas, from trade and energy to the defense industry, as well as consular and cultural affairs. Most importantly, we remain committed to achieving the $5 billion bilateral trade target set by our presidents.
United Nations Habitat says Afghanistan faces a major urban challenge, with half of its population expected to live in cities by 2060. The agency warns many cities are unprepared, raising concerns over housing, services and living conditions. Our correspondent Tamim Bahiz has the details from Kabul.
It's estimated that around 45 million people live in Afghanistan right now, and in 2060 it's thought about 90 million will be living in the country, double the figure of today according to Population Pyramid. And half of those people in 34 years' time are expected to be living in cities. That's according to the UN Habitat, which says they're concerned that without proper planning, urban growth could worsen existing problems, including overcrowded housing, poor access to clean water, weak sanitation systems, limited public services and unsafe living conditions. The UN agency is stressing the need to prioritize adequate and safe living environment, saying it is essential if Afghan cities are to offer a decent quality of life for all residents. This warning comes at a time when many families have already moved from rural areas to cities in search of work, security, education and basic services. Kabul and other major urban centers have seen increasing demand for housing and infrastructure, while local systems remain under strain. Urban experts say the challenge is not only population growth, but how cities are managed. Proper urban planning, investment in housing, access to services and stronger local governance will be key to preventing further pressure on vulnerable communities. UN Habitat's message is that Afghanistan's cities are growing, but preparation is lagging behind. And without urgent attention, rapid urbanization could deepen poverty and inequality in the years ahead. Tamim Bahiz in Kabul, iNews.
Uzbekistan is looking to strengthen its position along the Trans-Caspian corridor by expanding cargo transportation through Georgia's Black Sea port of Poti. Officials from both countries have discussed increasing freight volumes and making greater use of the port's logistics infrastructure. Our correspondent Sevil Rajapova reports.
Uzbekistan is exploring ways to increase export and import shipments through the Georgian port of Poti, one of the country's main gateways to European and global markets. During meetings in Tbilisi this week, transport officials from Uzbekistan and Georgia discussed expanding cooperation across road, rail, sea and air transport. They also talked about improving the integration of Uzbekistan's transport network with the middle corridors linking Central Asia to Europe. An Uzbek delegation later visited the port of Poti and held talks with the operators of the Free Industrial Zone, container terminals and logistics companies. Discussions focused on expanding storage capacity, container handling, multimodal transport services, and the efficient movement of export, import, and transit cargo. The visit also reviewed progress on Uzbekistan's own logistics terminal under construction in Port's Free Industrial Zone. The 30-hectare, $18.3 million project, launched in September 2024, will include cold storage facilities, warehouses and terminals for bulk, oversized and containerized cargo, providing Uzbek exporters with direct access to Black Sea shipping routes. The project forms part of Uzbekistan's strategy to diversify export corridors, reduce transit risks, and strengthen trade links with Europe and other international markets. It is Civil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A News.
Azerbaijan is positioning itself as a regional gateway for trade and investment as leaders and business executives gathered in Baku to explore new opportunities for economic diversification and cross-border cooperation. The forum also delivered tangible outcomes, including a new loan agreement and the opening of a business center aimed at boosting private sector growth and innovation.
The Black Sea Trade and Development Bank, in partnership with Azerbaijan's Export and Investment Promotion Agency, has concluded a business forum in Baku held as part of the 28th annual meeting of the bank's Board of Governors, chaired this year by Azerbaijan. Held under the theme Connecting Markets, Diversifying Economies, Azerbaijan as a regional hub, the forum brought together government officials, financial institutions and business leaders to discuss Azerbaijan's economic priorities, regional cooperation and investment opportunities. Opening the event, Finance Minister Sahil Babayev highlighted Azerbaijan's growing role as a strategic transport and trade link between Europe and Asia. He said the country is focused on diversifying its economy beyond energy, strengthening the private sector, supporting small and medium-sized businesses, and increasing integration into regional and global value chains. BSTDB President Serhat Köksal noted that over the past 2 decades, the bank has supported projects across finance, manufacturing, trade and energy, helping create jobs and boost competitiveness. Köksal said the forum provided an important platform for building new partnerships, attracting investment and expanding business networks. The event also featured the signing of a loan agreement to support private sector growth, economic development and trade in Azerbaijan, followed by business-to-business meetings aimed at strengthening collaboration between financial institutions and the private sector. Narçiçek Cahangirli, Avaz Hajiyev, A News.
This concludes our news update for the hour. Thank you for your time and stay tuned to A News for more updates.